Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Suddenly widowed, the woman had long hesitated to enter her husband's garage. He had always strictly forbidden her, but when she decided to sell the house, she had no choice. She opened the door and almost screamed at what she saw. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy our story, don't forget to subscribe and give us a like. Thank you for your support, and we wish you a pleasant listen. Oliva made one final adjustment to the table setting. Amber golden tea in clear cups, almond cookies on a porcelain plate, snow-white napkins, everything was perfect, as always in their home. The clock showed 7 p.m. She smiled when she heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. Sebastian always came home exactly on time. "Olivita, I'm home," his deep, confident voice echoed through the apartment. She rushed to the hallway, fixing her hair as she went. 15 years of marriage, and her heart still fluttered when he came back from work. "How was your day?" Oliva helped him take off his jacket. Sebastian hugged her, letting his hands rest on her waist longer than usual. "Oh, the usual, running around, meetings, exhausting," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "And yours?" Oliva looked up at him, noticing for the first time the increase of gray in his temples. Strange that she hadn't seen it earlier. "I made your favorite dinner." And also, she hesitated, Elena called again, asking for money. Sebastian's face tensed slightly, but he quickly smiled and stroked her cheek. "Let's not talk about Elena tonight. I have something for you." From his inner pocket, he took out a velvet box. "What is it?" Oliva asked in surprise. "Open it and see." Inside was a white gold necklace with a sapphire, so delicate and expensive, it took her breath away. "Sebastian, but there's no occasion." "Do I need a reason to make my beloved wife happy?" he said, gently fastening the necklace around her neck. "You're the only one for me." His voice sounded strange, almost guilty, but Oliva pushed the thought aside. They had such a wonderful, strong marriage. Every one of her friends envied their happiness. That night, lying in bed, she recalled how Sebastian had recently started forgetting his phone in his jacket. He used to always keep it in his trouser pocket. And that one time, when she tried to answer a call, he literally snatched it from her hands. "Business partners, don't answer," he said. Oliva hadn't suspected anything then, or maybe she just hadn't wanted to see it. 2 days later, Sebastian died, suddenly, at a business meeting. "Heart attack," the doctors said. At 45, Oliva repeated, not believing her own words. The days that followed blurred into a dull nightmare, identifying the body, organizing the funeral, wreaths, endless calls and messages. Oliva moved like in a fog, mechanically doing what was necessary. She didn't cry, she couldn't, even though everyone expected tears. The funeral was crowded, with many people she had never seen before. "Our condolences," they kept repeating. "Your husband was a remarkable man." Oliva nodded, unable to comprehend how these strangers could speak of Sebastian in the past tense. Maria, her only true friend, didn't leave her side. "You need to eat," she said, trying to press a sandwich into Oliva's hands. "You're collapsing, 3 days on nothing but coffee." "I'm not hungry," Oliva whispered. "And I'm not tired. I just don't understand. Just the day before yesterday, we were having tea." Maria hugged her tightly. "You're strong, Oliva. You'll get through this. And I'm always here, you hear?" After the ceremony, once everyone had left, Elena approached. Her eyes were red from crying, but something about her expression, predatory, watchful, made Oliva tense up. "I'm so sorry, little sister," Elena said, enveloping her in a cloud of sweet perfume. "You know Sebastian was like a brother to me." Oliva nodded, though strangely she could hardly bear her sister's presence now. "Listen," Elena's voice turned businesslike, "you probably haven't thought about finances yet, but I'd like to get back the money Sebastian lent me." Oliva stared at her, confused. "What money?" "You always asked for loans, but Sebastian never." "He didn't tell you, of course," Elena interrupted quickly. You're always so obsessed with every peso. But he helped me when I was really struggling. Oliva felt nausea rise in her throat. I can't talk about this right now, Elena. Let's talk later. Of course, little sister, Elena pursed her lips. I just want you to know, I'm counting on your support now that you're a wealthy widow. Those words cut Oliva like a knife. Wealthy widow. Elena always knew how to find the most cruel expressions. After the funeral came long, empty days. Oliva wandered through the apartment, unable to find peace. For 15 years her life had revolved around Sebastian, his schedule, his habits, his desires. Now there was only silence and emptiness pressing down on her. I didn't even know what he really did, she realized. Sebastian never discussed work, only what was necessary. I don't want to burden you, he used to say. And she had accepted that. A week after the funeral, a notary arrived, a short, balding man with a worn briefcase and observant eyes. Good afternoon, Oliva Andrea, he greeted her, shaking her hand with a dry, warm palm. I need to go over your husband's will. They sat in the kitchen. The notary, Victor Paulino, took out a stack of papers. The key points are straightforward, he spoke clearly, as if dictating. As the legal spouse, you inherit the apartment, the car, the bank accounts, and 51% of your husband's company shares. Everything is in order, no legal issues. Oliva nodded. It meant nothing to her. Money wouldn't bring Sebastian back. There's one odd thing, the notary frowned. Your husband made changes just 3 days before his death. He added a clause about certain documents that should be delivered to specific individuals. What individuals? Oliva's heart began to race. That's just it, Paulino spread his hands. The list of names and documents is missing. It looks like Sebastian Alejandro didn't finish the updated version. Oliva flinched. 3 days before his death. That was the very night he gave her the necklace. After the notary left, the phone rang again, Elena. Oliva, we need to talk. It's urgent, her voice was insistent and nervous. Elena, I can't right now. It's about Sebastian. His will. I know something you don't. A chill ran down Oliva's spine. I'm not ready for revelations. Let's talk later. But the money. Elena, please. There was steel in Oliva's voice now. The line went silent. Fine, Elena hissed. But don't say I didn't warn you. When everything comes to light, remember, I'm your sister. The only close person you have left. Oliva hung up. It was always like this with Elena, blackmail and manipulation. Their poor mother had suffered so much from her, especially during the teenage years. Suddenly, Oliva's gaze fell on Sebastian's keyring lying on the dresser. Among the usual keys was one she had never touched before, a small, oddly shaped key to a garage box. The garage was the only place Sebastian never invited her. A woman has no place among tools and grease, he used to say, smiling. Oliva picked up the key, turning it in her fingers. A strange feeling grew inside her, a mix of fear and resolve. What if the documents he meant to include in the will are in there, she thought. In 15 years of marriage, she had never disobeyed him. Never questioned his decisions. But now, there were questions only she could answer. And what about those strange business trips, Oliva remembered, when he came back refreshed and cheerful? The phone calls he always took out on the balcony? It had always been easier not to notice, not to think, not to analyze. But now she had to know the truth, no matter how bitter. She stood up decisively. Now or never. The next morning, she drove to the garage complex, half an hour from their home in the San Miguel district. She had never been here before, concrete blocks covered in graffiti, trash between rows, the smell of motor oil. Everything felt foreign. Sebastian owned the last unit at the far end. A heavy metal door with peeling paint, so unlike his usual impeccable style. The key turned with difficulty in the lock. Inside, it was dark and musty. Oliva felt for the light switch. When the light flicked on, she froze on the threshold. What she saw looked nothing like a garage or a tool shed. The walls were covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and strange diagrams. In the center stood a table piled with folders. In the corner, a locked safe. Oliva approached the wall slowly. Photos. Dozens of photos of Sebastian. But not the Sebastian she knew, no suit, no restraint, no polished look. Here he was casual, careless, his face wearing an unfamiliar expression. And in most photos, he wasn't alone. A woman. The same woman over and over again. Beautiful, a bit younger than Oliva, with long dark hair and a hard stare. Oliva's hands began to tremble. She looked at the dates written on the back of the photos, 5, 7, 10 years ago, nearly the entire span of their marriage. On a shelf stood a framed picture, Sebastian, the same woman, and a young man. They were smiling, relaxed, happy, like a family. On the back of the photo was a caption, Natalia and Antonio, August 2024. A lump formed in Oliva's throat. August 2024. Just 3 months ago. While she was preparing dinner, waiting for him to return from a business trip, he had been posing for photos with, who? A mistress? Her son? His son? How could I not see it? 15 years. 15 years I lived with someone I clearly didn't know at all. Her thoughts blurred as she scanned photo after photo. She clutched the edge of the table to keep from falling. Her gaze fell on an open folder. Among the documents was a sheet with the logo of a well-known clinic. A medical report, patient, S.A. Terrasses. Diagnosis, ischemic heart disease, exertional angina, high risk of myocardial infarction. Oliva sank onto a nearby chair. Sebastian had known he could die at any moment, and for all those years, he had lived a double life. The necklace, the sudden tenderness, the change in the will, now it all made terrifying sense. At that moment, she heard footsteps behind her, slow, cautious footsteps of someone trying not to be noticed. Oliva turned sharply. Standing in the garage doorway was the young man from the last photograph. Antonio, tall, dark-haired, with a piercing gaze in which she saw, with horror, Sebastian's eyes. "Hello, Oliva Andrea," he said calmly, without a smile. "I thought I'd find you here sooner." "Who are you?" Oliva exhaled, feeling panic swell inside her. "Sebastian Alejandro's son," the young man said after a pause. "And I'm here to talk about the inheritance." Oliva felt the room begin to spin. She grabbed the edge of the table, trying to steady herself. "This must be a mistake," she said. Her voice sounded strange, as if it didn't belong to her. "Sebastian and we didn't have children." Antonio took a few steps forward. In the dim light of the single bulb, his face looked harder than in the photograph. "You didn't," he said evenly. "But my mother and Sebastian did." He glanced at the photo still clutched in Oliva's hand. "I see you've already met our family history." "Our family," those words stung worse than a slap. "I didn't know anything," Oliva managed to say. "Nothing about this, about you, about your mother." Antonio's face softened. "I know. My father always said you weren't aware of his other life." He sat down in the old chair opposite her. Oliva noticed the way he moved, those same confident, measured gestures as Sebastian. The resemblance was undeniable. "I'm sorry you're learning the truth this way," Antonio continued. "My father meant to talk to you after he got his diagnosis, but he didn't make it." "You mentioned the inheritance?" "Yes. He left me an official will. I thought it would be in the safe here, but it can only be opened with your key." He gestured toward the key in Oliva's hand. "This?" She looked at the small key, surprised. "It's for the garage." "For the garage and the safe," Antonio nodded. "Dual function. My father liked tricks like that." Of course he did, Oliva thought. Like keeping a double life for 15 years. "And what if I don't want to open the safe?" she asked suddenly. What if I don't want to know what else he was hiding from me? Antonio looked her straight in the eye. Then you'll never know who the man you lived with for all those years really was. And believe me, it's not just about our family. What else is it about? Money. Business. His real work. Oliva gripped the key tightly in her hand until it hurt. Then, with resolve, she approached the safe and inserted the key into the lock. The sound of the doorbell woke Maria. Standing on her doorstep was Oliva, pale, hollow-eyed, and holding a massive folder of documents. Oliva, what happened? Maria pulled her inside. You look terrible. I need your help, Oliva said in a flat voice, and your promise not to tell anyone. Instead of replying, Maria silently hugged her and led her to the kitchen. Unlike Oliva's sterile, polished kitchen, Maria's had a cozy mess, children's drawings on the fridge, an unwashed cup in the sink, a thriving plant on the windowsill, the warm chaos of normal life. Talk to me, Maria said, setting a strong cup of coffee in front of her. What are those documents? Oliva spread the folder's contents across the table, photos, bank statements, contracts. Sebastian lived a double life, she said, surprised at how calm she sounded. He had another woman and a son. A 30-year-old son. Maria whistled. What a bastard. She quickly covered her mouth. Sorry, but... It's okay, Oliva nodded wearily. He really was a bastard. And I'm an idiot for not noticing anything for 15 years. Maria studied her friend intently. You're not an idiot. You trusted your husband. That's normal. It's blindness, Oliva replied. Listen, I want to show you something. She pulled out several bank statements. Look. Monthly transfers to another bank account, large sums. I checked. The account is under the name Natalia Vertinska. That's her, the woman from the photo. And the guy, his son? What does he want? Money? Antonio? Oliva frowned. Strangely enough, no. He said Sebastian already signed over some business shares to him. Officially, he's co-owner of one of the companies. But his mother, she died a year ago. Died? Maria looked at the beautiful dark-haired woman in the photo. She looks healthy. Cancer. Rapid. According to the medical documents, she was gone in 3 months. Oliva distractedly sorted the papers into 2 piles. You know what's strangest? She looked up at Maria. The safe didn't just contain information about his second family. There were documents about offshore companies, money laundering schemes, contracts with foreign firms. I think Sebastian was involved in more than just legitimate business. Maria whistled again. So now you're tied to some kind of crime? I don't know. Oliva rubbed her temples. It's all so tangled. Look at this, she pulled out another document. It's a power of attorney. Sebastian gave it to someone named Ignacio Oliva. It states that in the event of Sebastian's death, this Oliva gets control over all assets until the official distribution of the inheritance. I have no idea who he is. Maria tapped her fingers on the table. Does Antonio know anything about this Oliva? I don't think so. He was focused on the unofficial will. Sebastian wrote it 2 weeks before he died. Oliva unfolded a piece of paper. He didn't even notarize it, just wrote down his last wishes. She opened it. Sebastian's handwriting. Neat, confident lines. In the event of my death, I ask that the estate be divided as follows: to Oliva, our apartment, my share in the official business, and 50% of the funds from my personal accounts. To Antonio, the remaining 50% and a share in the company Mercurio Inn, already registered to him. To Elena, 20% from the sale of the country house. Wait, Maria raised a hand. Elena? Your sister? Oliva nodded silently and continued reading. I especially note that Elena is entitled to this amount as compensation for. The line trailed off. Compensation for what? Maria frowned. I don't know, Oliva shrugged. Then there's something about documents to be given to Antonio and a key to a safe deposit box. Sebastian didn't finish the will. She leaned back in her chair. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is Elena. Why does she need compensation? For what? And how is she involved in all this? Maybe she knew about the second family, Maria suggested. Maybe, Oliva rubbed her brow. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised by anything. She began putting the documents back into the folder. I need to talk to my sister. But first, I need to sleep. I'm barely standing. Stay here, Maria said, getting up to prepare the couch. My daughter's at Grandma's tonight, so no one will disturb you. Thank you, Oliva squeezed her friend's hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. The phone rang at 6 a.m., waking Oliva. She groped for it on the nightstand. Unknown number. Hello? Oliva Andrea, said an unfamiliar male voice. This is Ignacio Oliva. We need to meet urgently. Oliva sat up sharply. How do you have my number? Sebastian left me all your contact information in case of his death. Apologies for the early call, but this matter is pressing. Oliva glanced at the clock. All right. Where and when? In 1 hour, at Café Britannia on Libertador Avenue. I'll be wearing a light-colored jacket and holding a newspaper. I'll be there, Oliva said and hung up. She dressed quickly, left a note for Maria, and slipped out of the apartment. The morning was cool and quiet, a few early passers-by hurrying along. Café Britannia turned out to be a small establishment with a British flair, dark wood panels, stained glass windows, portraits of monarchs on the walls. At such an early hour, there were barely any patrons. Ignacio Oliva, a fit man of about 50 in a light linen jacket, was seated at a corner table, leafing through Clarin. When he saw Oliva, he stood and gave a polite bow. Thank you for coming, he said in a smooth, almost oily voice. Please, have a seat. Oliva sat down across from him, studying this strange man. There was something oddly familiar about him, though she was certain they had never met. You worked for my husband, she said without preamble. With your husband, Oliva corrected. I was his partner on certain projects. A waitress brought 2 cups of coffee, although Oliva hadn't ordered anything. I took the liberty of ordering for you, Oliva said. Cappuccino, no sugar. Sebastian said that's how you like your coffee in the morning. It sounded almost intimate, as if this stranger knew more about her than he should. What do you want? Oliva asked. Not me, Oliva set the paper aside. You. I came to warn you and offer my help. Warn me about what? That some of your husband's business partners are very interested in the documents from his safe, especially those concerning foreign operations. Oliva tried to keep her face neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Oliva leaned forward slightly. And I know that you found those documents yesterday, with Sebastian's son. Oliva froze. They had been watching her. What do you want? To protect you, Oliva answered simply. Sebastian asked me to, before he died. He knew his heart could give out at any moment. Sebastian asked you to protect me? From whom? From the people he did business with. From those who will try to gain control over his assets. From those who might decide it's easier to get rid of the heirs than to negotiate with them. There was not a trace of threat in Oliva's voice. He spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather. And how exactly are you planning to protect me? Oliva tried to keep her voice steady. First, by explaining what you've gotten yourself into. You see, your husband's business wasn't just about real estate, as you thought. For the last 10 years, he worked with some very serious people. He was involved in international financial operations, shall we say. Money laundering? Oliva asked bluntly. Oliva smiled faintly. I prefer the term tax flow optimization. But yes, you understood correctly. Oliva pushed away her untouched coffee cup. I have nothing to do with any of this, and I don't want to. Unfortunately, that's no longer up to you, leave aside. You're the heir, which means in the eyes of many, you're now the keeper of important secrets and the holder of significant assets. What are you suggesting? Cooperation, he replied. I'll help you deal with the inheritance, protect your interests, and get through this with minimal losses. In return, I ask only one thing, your trust, and access to some of the documents from the safe. Specifically, the ones stamped by foreign banks. Oliva was deep in thought. This man could be either a savior or a new threat. I need time, she finally said. I need to think. Of course, Leva pulled a business card from his inner pocket. But don't take too long, you have 2, maybe 3 days before the situation gets out of control. He stood up, leaving money for the coffee. And one more thing, Oliva Andrea, be careful with your sister. Later that evening, Oliva arrived at the apartment building where Elena lived, a new development on the outskirts of the city in Palermo, with a guarded entrance, concierge, and surveillance cameras. Oliva looked around in surprise. Where did her perpetually broke sister get the money for a place like this? She got her answer the moment she stepped inside. On the living room wall hung a framed photo, Elena and Sebastian, smiling, champagne glasses in hand. Judging by the date in the corner, it had been taken 5 years ago. I see you've already started the tour of my humble abode, Elena said from the bedroom doorway, a cigarette in her hand. Silk robe, expensive makeup, perfectly styled hair, even at home, her sister looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. What is this? Oliva pointed at the photo, rage simmering inside her. Oh, that was one of Sebastian's corporate events, Elena replied. He invited me because you, as usual, didn't want to go to some boring party with his colleagues. She exhaled smoke and smirked. Don't make that face, sis. Sebastian and I always got along great, you know that. How great? Oliva asked, barely containing her anger. Elena walked into the living room and sank into the couch, lounging against the cushions. Are you jealous? She laughed hoarsely. Don't worry, you and Sebastian had the perfect marriage. A lovely home, financial security, no scandals, everything you love. Quiet, convenient, predictable. Oliva exhaled slowly, struggling to keep her fury at bay. I was in his garage, Elena. I saw the unofficial will. Elena's face froze for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. So, she stubbed her cigarette in a crystal ashtray. Was there something interesting in it? There was a mention of you, Oliva stared at her. Something about compensation he owed you. For what, Elena? Why did Sebastian owe you anything? Elena stayed silent, inspecting her perfectly manicured nails. Elena. For silence, she finally answered, raising her eyes. For my silence about his second family. Oliva sank into a chair across from her, her legs unable to hold her. You knew, all this time? Of course I knew. Elena got up and walked to the bar. Drink? I have a great pisco. Without waiting for a reply, she poured 2 glasses and handed one to Oliva. I found out by accident, about 10 years ago. Saw them together, Sebastian, that Natalia of his, and the boy. They were leaving a restaurant in Puerto Madero, so happy. He saw me and went pale. Then he came over and begged me not to tell anyone, especially you. And you agreed? Oliva could hardly believe what she was hearing. Your own sister, and you. What was I supposed to do? Elena snapped. Run to you screaming, your husband's a cheater? You wouldn't have believed me. You would have accused me of jealousy, of trying to ruin your perfect happiness. She took a big sip of pisco. Besides, Sebastian offered me money. Good money, for my silence. And back then I was barely scraping by. So yes, I took it. And I kept taking it all these years. Oliva quietly turned the untouched glass in her hands. 1,000 questions swirled in her head, but she couldn't bring herself to ask a single one. You know what's funny? Elena continued, pouring herself more pisco. He really loved you, in his own way. Natalia was his passion, but you were his peace. With her, my soul rests, that's what he used to say. Oliva set her glass down sharply. Don't you dare, her voice trembled with rage, don't you dare tell me what he said about our marriage. You betrayed me, Elena, your own sister. I protected you. Elena shouted, splashing pisco. From a truth you didn't want to see. From the reality the rest of us live in. You were always so proper, always did everything by the book. And what did it get you? You became a housemaid for a man who lied to you for years. They stood facing each other, two sisters, alike on the outside and so different within. But this isn't about me, Oliva said suddenly. It's about Sebastian leaving you part of his inheritance, 20% of the sale from the country house. Why? What else do you know, Elena? Elena turned toward the window. There is something else, she said in a low voice. But you're not ready to hear it. After everything I've learned in the last 2 days, try me. Elena turned slowly. Her face was a strange mixture of resolve and fear. I'm pregnant, Oliva. And the baby is Sebastian's. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Oliva stared at her sister, slowly realizing, not just complicit, his lover. Not just silent, betrayer. How far along? Oliva's voice was unnaturally calm. 10 weeks, Elena instinctively placed a hand on her stomach. I found out a week before he died. Did he know? Elena nodded, not meeting her sister's eyes. What did he say? That he would take care of the baby. That he'd make everything right. Oliva stood abruptly, nausea rising in her throat. God, Elena, how could you? She took a step toward her sister. You're my sister. Do you understand that? You know what they say, Elena laughed nervously. You can't help who you fall in love with. Love? Oliva choked out. Don't talk to me about love. This isn't love, it's betrayal. Oh please, what do you know about love? Elena snapped. You always lived by the manual. Perfect husband, perfect house, dinner at 7. You didn't even notice he'd been living another life for years. At least with me, he felt alive. Oliva stood frozen, looking at the person she thought she knew. Her own sister. Her own blood. I'm leaving, she said, walking to the door. And where will you go? Elena shouted after her. Back to your perfect house built on lies? Your whole life is an illusion, Oliva. At least I'm honest with myself. Honest? Oliva turned back, her hand on the doorknob. Sleeping with your sister's husband, that's what you call honesty? Elena's face twisted with pain and fury. Then go on, say you won't honor his final wish. Say you won't give me the inheritance he left. Prove you're no better than me. That behind all your decency, you hide the same petty spite. Oliva stared at her sister for several long seconds. I will carry out his wish, not for you, but for the child. The child is innocent. With that, she left and closed the door behind her. The night air chilled her burning face. Oliva walked through the empty streets of San Telmo, aimless. Inside, everything was numb, no pain, no rage, just a hollow silence. It felt as though she were watching her life from the outside, unable to believe any of it was real. A husband who lived a double life. A sister who was his mistress. A 30-year-old stepson she never knew about. And now, this child. Sebastian's blood. Elena's blood. Their child. Her phone rang in her bag. Oliva flinched and pulled it out. Maria. Oliva, where are you? I'm worried. Oliva looked around, realizing she didn't even know where she was. I don't know. I'm just walking. What happened? Maria's voice was filled with concern. Elena is pregnant, with Sebastian's child. Maria gasped. Stay where you are. I'm coming. Send me your location. 20 minutes later, a taxi pulled up. Maria jumped out, still pulling on her jacket. She hugged Oliva tightly. Let's go to my place. You shouldn't be alone right now. In the car, Oliva spoke softly, almost to herself. You know, I used to think envy was something petty, beneath me. But now I see, it can destroy lives. Elena always envied me, my marriage, my home, my life. And in the end, she took all of it. Piece by piece. This isn't your fault, Maria squeezed her hand. I know. But that doesn't make it any easier. When they reached Maria's apartment, Oliva collapsed onto the couch, staring at a fixed point. Tea? Or something stronger? Maria asked. Nothing. I just want to wake up and realize this was all a dream. Maria sat down beside her. What are you going to do now? I don't know, Oliva shook her head. The only thing I do know for sure is that I can't go back to that house. I can't sleep in that bed, eat off those plates, breathe that air. Everything is soaked in lies. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Maria looked at the clock in surprise. It was nearly midnight. Are you expecting someone? No. Maria carefully approached the door and looked through the peephole. There's a man outside, she whispered. What does he look like? Young, tall, dark hair. Antonio, Oliva stood up. Let him in. When the door opened, Antonio was leaning against the wall. At the sight of Oliva, relief crossed his face. Finally, he straightened up. I went to your house, then to your sister's. She said, you might be here. Elena gave you this address? Oliva asked in surprise. No, Antonio shook his head. My father kept a list of all your relatives' addresses, just in case. Of course, Oliva thought, he controlled everything, even after death. What do you want? She asked wearily. To talk. It's urgent. Maria looked at Oliva questioningly, and she nodded. Antonio stepped inside, glancing around as he entered, a habit of someone who always assesses the environment. I'm Maria, Oliva's friend introduced herself. I'll leave you to talk. No, Oliva stopped her. Stay. I have no secrets from you. Antonio sat on the edge of a chair, still wearing his coat, as if he didn't plan to stay long. Oliva came to see me today, he began without preamble. He offered me a deal. Oliva tensed. What kind of deal? He said he could help me gain full control over my share in Mercurio if I gave him the documents from my father's safe, the ones he probably mentioned to you as well. How do you know he spoke with me? Because he said you'd already agreed. And that I should hurry or I'd be left with nothing. Oliva gave a bitter smile. He lied. I never promised him anything. Antonio nodded, as if he had expected that. I figured as much. But that's not all. After he left, I got another call from someone named Jorge Valentino Crespo. Does that name mean anything to you? Oliva shook her head. He said he's the real owner of the funds my father was moving through his companies, and that if all documents aren't returned within 3 days, there will be serious consequences. Maria exchanged a frightened glance with Oliva. That's a threat? It sounded like one, Antonio confirmed. I'm starting to think my father was involved in something far more serious than just tax evasion. A laundering operation for criminal money, Oliva suggested. Probably. And judging by how aggressive these people are, the sums involved must be huge. Maria stood up and paced the room nervously. Okay, let's think. 2 different people want the same documents. One offers protection, the other threatens us. What do we do? Hand over the documents and forget the whole thing, Oliva said firmly. I want nothing to do with Sebastian's dirty affairs. It's not that simple, Antonio shook his head. Oliva talked about papers with stamps from foreign banks. But Crespo mentioned encryption keys and account access codes. I think we're talking about different sets of documents. And where are they all? Maria asked. Some are in the safe Oliva and I already opened, Antonio replied. But my father was careful, he likely kept the most important things elsewhere. Oliva thought for a moment, recalling Sebastian's unofficial will. There was something about a key to a safety deposit box. Right, Antonio nodded. But where's the key? They all fell silent in thought. Maria broke the silence. Oliva, did you go through all of Sebastian's things? Maybe he hid it somewhere? I don't even know what I'm looking for, Oliva shrugged. A key could look like anything. Antonio suddenly straightened, as if struck by a thought. The necklace, he said. Father gave you a necklace shortly before he died, didn't he? Oliva instinctively touched her neck, though the jewelry wasn't there. Yes, 2 days before. How do you know? He mentioned it. Said it was a special gift. Antonio was visibly excited. Where is it now? In the jewelry box at home, Oliva began to understand. We need to check it. Father had a habit of hiding important things in plain sight. If you want to hide something, leave it where everyone can see it, he used to say. The apartment greeted them with silence and the stale scent of air long undisturbed. Oliva, Antonio, and Maria entered without turning on the main lights, only a small lamp in the hallway. The box is in the bedroom, Oliva said, heading toward the door. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked. All three froze. There was someone in the darkened living room. Don't move, a male voice said. Stay calm. A switch clicked, and in the soft light of a floor lamp, they saw Ignacio Oliva sitting in an armchair. You broke into my apartment? Oliva demanded. Apologies for the intrusion, Oliva said evenly. But time is short. You could have called, Antonio noted, watching him closely. I did. Many times, Oliva looked at Oliva. You didn't answer. Meanwhile, the situation is deteriorating. Crespo called you, didn't he? Antonio stiffened. How do you know? Because he called me too, Oliva stood. And gave me the same 3-day deadline. He thinks I have what he's after, but I don't. I believe you do, or will, once you find the key to the safety deposit box. We don't know anything about a key, Oliva lied. Oliva smiled gently, without mockery. Oliva Andrea, let's not waste time. Sebastian was a smart man. He wouldn't give you an expensive necklace for no reason, especially right before his death. Oliva and Antonio exchanged glances. How did Oliva know about the necklace? You've been following us? Oliva asked. Let's call it surveillance, for your own safety. Maria stepped forward, placing herself between Oliva and Oliva. This whole conversation feels off. Maybe we should call the police. I don't think that's a good idea, Oliva shook his head. The police will ask questions none of us are ready to answer, especially Antonio, considering certain aspects of his immigration status. Antonio flinched slightly. Oliva knew too much. Let's check the necklace, Oliva said suddenly. If there's something hidden inside, we'll decide together what to do next. Oliva spread his hands. A reasonable proposal. They went to the bedroom. Oliva opened the closet and took out a small jewelry box. Inside was the sapphire necklace Sebastian had given her on that final evening. In the lamp's light, the stone looked almost black. Let me see, Antonio reached for it. Father had a trick. He examined the clasp carefully, then twisted it counterclockwise. A soft click. Part of the clasp came loose, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a tiny metal plate engraved with numbers. That's not a key, Maria said in disappointment. No, Antonio confirmed. It's a code. For the safety deposit box? Oliva asked. For a safe, Oliva corrected, peering at the plate. A safe in Sebastian Alejandro's office. That's where the physical key to the deposit box is stored. How do you know that? Antonio asked in surprise. Because I helped your father install the system, Leva answered simply. Double-layer security. Very typical of him. Oliva turned the metal plate in her hands thoughtfully. What's in that safety deposit box? I believe it contains exactly what Crespo is looking for, Leva said. Documents proving that the money your husband helped move doesn't actually belong to Crespo, but to his partners. And why do you care? Maria asked. Leva hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak the truth. You see, I represent those partners. It's my job to make sure Crespo doesn't claim funds that aren't his. So this is a turf war between criminals over dirty money? Oliva asked bluntly. And you want us involved? I want you to survive, Leva's voice hardened. Crespo doesn't leave witnesses. If we don't comply, he'll come after all of you. I offer protection and enough money for a fresh start anywhere. A heavy silence fell. Everyone understood the seriousness of the situation. We need time to think, Oliva finally said. Of course, Leva headed for the door. But don't take too long. The clock is ticking. Once he was gone, Oliva, Antonio, and Maria exchanged looks. I don't like any of this, Maria was the first to speak. Me neither, Antonio agreed. But it seems we don't have much of a choice. Oliva walked to the window and drew back the curtain. Dawn was breaking. She gave a bitter smile. Just a week ago, the idea that she'd be deciding who to hand over illegal documents to would have seemed absurd. Her whole life, she tried to do the right thing, to live by the law and by her conscience. But now, she realized, the world didn't have clear boundaries between truth and lies, between good and evil. There was only one question. Which evil is lesser, and whose truth might save your life? Tomorrow, we go to Sebastian's office, Oliva said firmly. We need to find out what's in that safe. And then? Antonio asked. Oliva turned to him, a strange determination in her eyes. Then we'll make a decision. Together. The autumn morning greeted them with a steady drizzle. Oliva stared out the taxi window at the gray streets, watching raindrops slide down the glass like tears. Antonio sat silently beside her, and Maria was in the back seat. They were heading to the office building in the city's business district where Sebastian had worked. When was the last time you were there? Oliva broke the silence, turning to Antonio. A month ago, he replied, watching the streets go by. Father called me to discuss my share in the company. And you knew he was sick? She asked softly. Antonio nodded. I knew, but I didn't think it would be so soon. There was the same bewilderment in his voice that Oliva had felt all this time. Losing a father, even one as complicated and elusive as Sebastian, was still a loss. And it was strange to realize that they now shared the same grief, the same blood. Maria, from the back seat, watched them, so different, yet eerily similar. The same gestures, the same way of holding their heads, even that same pause mid-sentence, as if collecting thoughts before continuing. It's strange, Oliva said quietly, more to herself than her companions. All my life I dreamed of having a child, and instead I got a grown stepson I didn't even know existed. Antonio looked at her in surprise. You wanted children? Of course, Oliva smiled sadly. But Sebastian always said, not yet. First we need stability, then a bigger apartment. There was always a reason. And then I just stopped asking. The taxi stopped in front of a tall glass building, the Catalinas Business Center. Oliva stepped out and looked up, the upper floors lost in low-hanging autumn clouds. There, on the 14th floor, was the office of Terrazas Inversions, Sebastian Terrazas' official company. Another part of her husband's life she had barely known. 15 years beside a man, and still, such a gulf of secrets. Will they let us in? Maria asked as they approached the building. I have keys and a pass, Antonio replied. Officially, I'm a co-owner. I have full access. In the elevator, Oliva nervously turned over the small box with the necklace in her hands. The sapphire necklace Sebastian had given her 2 days before his death held the code to his office safe, a deceptively beautiful object hiding a cruel truth, just like their marriage. The office greeted them with silence and the lingering scent of coffee, as though it had seeped into the walls. The furniture was sleek, mostly gray and blue tones, everything perfectly in order, a reflection of Sebastian's character. He had always valued restraint and functionality. His office is at the end of the corridor, Antonio said, pointing to the glass door. On the way, Oliva slowed as they passed a wall of photographs. In them, Sebastian was shaking hands with important people, opening buildings, posing in front of charts and presentations. In every photo, he looked like a different man, confident businessman, tough negotiator, successful executive. Nothing like the man she had known at home. The office itself revealed a side of him she had never seen, a spacious room with a panoramic window, a massive desk, a luxurious leather chair. On the wall hung an abstract painting, which, according to Antonio, concealed the safe. Antonio removed the painting, revealing an electronic wall safe. Oliva took out the necklace and carefully retrieved the small metal plate hidden in its clasp. "Let me," Antonio said. He took the plate and entered the code. There was a soft click, the safe door popped open. Inside were several folders, a small wooden box, and an ordinary metal key with a tag. "I think this is the key to the safety deposit box," Antonio said, examining the tag. "Looks like it's from Banco de la Nación." Oliva opened one of the folders, contracts, statements, ledgers. Dry figures and legal terms that masked shady deals. How many over the years? How much money passed through Sebastian's hands? And more importantly, whose money was it? But what caught her attention most was the small, dark wooden box. Inside were a USB flash drive and a sealed envelope labeled to Oliva. "It's for you." Antonio handed her the envelope, and she felt her hands tremble. Oliva slowly opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. A letter, written in Sebastian's familiar handwriting. "Oliva, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm a coward and a selfish man who couldn't give up the comfort and peace you always gave me. I know by now you've learned about my double life and probably about Elena's child. Don't blame her too harshly. It's my fault. I used her weaknesses, her envy of you, for my own benefit. I was never the man you thought I was. All these years, I was moving money through shell companies. Dangerous people used my schemes, and I took my cut. You don't need to know the details. On the flash drive is information that could be your insurance or your danger. Depends on how you use it. Forgive me, if you can. I loved you, in my own way, but I did. Sebastian." Oliva finished the letter and silently handed it to Antonio. He scanned it quickly, and his expression darkened. The safety deposit box, the flash drive, he turned the key in his hand thoughtfully. Looks like he was trying to leave us some kind of protection. Protection from what? Maria asked. From whom? From the people he worked for, Oliva answered. Leva said he was trying to protect me. She sank heavily into Sebastian's chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the past few days. Every hour brought new revelations, new blows. It felt like the ground was slipping away beneath her feet. Why couldn't he just live honestly? She burst out. A normal job, a normal family, no secrets, no double lives, no shady deals. Sebastian always wanted more, Antonio said quietly. Money, power, excitement. I remember my mother once said, he's not made for a quiet life. The word stung. So he had been more honest with Natalia, or maybe she just understood him better. Did you see him often? She asked Antonio. Not really. Once a month, sometimes less. He'd come on weekends, Antonio shrugged. My mom always said, he has another life, one we're not a part of. And you knew about me? Antonio looked down. Yes. He mentioned you sometimes. Not by name, just my wife. Once he showed me a photo. A lump rose in Oliva's throat. So Antonio had always known about her, while she had never even guessed he existed. You know what's strangest, she said, trying to steady her voice. I always thought I knew Sebastian better than anyone. That there were no secrets between us. But I didn't know him at all. Not his past, not his present. He was a stranger. I don't think anyone truly knew him, Antonio said thoughtfully. Not even my mother. He only ever showed people the part of himself he wanted them to see. Maybe the real Sebastian never even existed. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening echoed down the corridor. The three of them froze, listening. No one's supposed to be here, Antonio whispered. It's Sunday, the office is closed. They heard footsteps approaching. Light, feminine steps. The door opened, and there stood Elena, in an elegant dress, perfectly styled, perfectly made up. She froze for a second at the sight of them, then quickly composed herself. There you are, she said, walking into the office. You could have at least told me you were coming. What are you doing here? Oliva asked in disbelief. Same as you, looking for answers. And it looks like you found something. Antonio instinctively shielded the flash drive and letter. How did you get in? He asked suspiciously. I have keys, Elena shrugged. I worked with Sebastian. You worked with him? Oliva was stunned. In what sense? Literally, Elena looked at her defiantly. I helped with documents, organizing meetings, sometimes negotiations. For about 3 years now. And also slept with him for the past 3 years? Oliva could barely contain her rage. No, Elena looked away. That started later, about 8 months ago. Oliva inhaled deeply, struggling to control the wave of emotion. She wanted to scream, to cry, to smash something. But instead, she asked in a calm voice. Why, Elena? You're my sister. Elena was silent, clenching and unclenching her fists. It's complicated, she finally said. At first, it was just work, good money, interesting tasks. Then we started spending more time together. He told me things he didn't tell anyone else. Trusted me. And you decided that gave you the right to my husband? Oliva's voice trembled. No, I didn't. Elena fell silent, then continued, quieter. I never thought it would become serious. It was a weakness, a mistake. But when I found out about the baby, she unconsciously placed a hand on her stomach. He promised to make things right. To take care of the baby. And you, too, she added bitterly. He always thought he could control everything. Please everyone. Oliva looked at her sister and no longer recognized her. Where was the Elena she used to play with, share secrets with, lean on during hard times? When had everything gone so wrong? Do you even understand what you've done? She asked quietly. You destroyed everything I believed in. My marriage, my family, my trust in you. And what was there to destroy? Elena snapped suddenly. Your perfect marriage that was built on lies? Sebastian was cheating on you with Natalia before you even got married. You just didn't want to see it. Her words struck like a slap. Oliva staggered, and Maria was immediately by her side, supporting her. That's enough, Maria said sharply to Elena. You've done enough. No, let her talk. Oliva stepped away from her friend. I want to know the whole truth. Go ahead, Elena, tell me what my life really was. Elena sank into a chair and suddenly broke down in tears, loud, messy sobs, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, makeup streaked down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, Oliva saw her strong, always composed sister completely fall apart. Oh God, Oliva. I never meant for it to be like this, Elena sobbed. It's just. I always envied you. You were the favorite child, the top student. Then you married the rich, handsome man. You had everything I ever wanted. And you decided to take it away? No, I didn't plan it. I just couldn't resist when the opportunity arose. Elena lifted her tear-streaked face. He knew how to persuade, you know that. He told me I was special, that I understood him like no one else. That with you he had one world, and with me another, and both mattered. Oliva slowly walked over to her sister and knelt before her. Just tell me one thing, she looked Elena in the eyes, did you love him? Elena stared at her sister for a long time, then slowly shook her head. No. I loved what he gave me, attention, admiration, a sense of worth, but not him. Maybe I don't even know how to love. At that moment, a noise echoed in the hallway, the heavy footsteps of several people. Damn, Elena jumped up, that could be security or Leva's men. We have to leave. How do you know about Leva? Antonio tensed. Because I worked with him, Elena answered quickly. I handled his transfers, met with his people. He's dangerous, and I'm sure he was involved in Sebastian's death. What? Oliva went cold. But the doctor said it was a heart attack. Yes, a heart attack, but who knows what triggered it? Elena gathered the documents and the flash drive from the table. I'll explain later. We have to go now. Antonio, is there another way out? Antonio nodded and led them to the service staircase at the far end of the corridor. They managed to disappear behind the door a second before two broad-shouldered men in dark suits entered the office. As they descended, Oliva felt a surge of anger growing inside her, not just at Elena and Sebastian, but at herself. For her blindness, her trust, for the years spent living in illusion. Where now? She asked once they exited through the service door. There's someone who can help us, said Elena, trying to catch her breath. An old friend of Sebastian's, Victor Salas. He has another unofficial will. Another one? Oliva raised her eyebrows. And you know what's in it? Not exactly, Elena shook her head, but Sebastian said it mentions our child and something important about his affairs. They took a taxi to Victor Salas's home. During the entire ride, Oliva stared out the window, not seeing the streets pass by. Her thoughts were far away, 15 years of marriage to a man she apparently never really knew. A sister who betrayed her in the cruelest way. A child to be born into a web of lies, another link in their twisted family history. But even more terrifying, she herself had blindly believed in an ideal world built in her imagination, refusing to see the truth. Victor lived in the old San Telmo district in a colonial-era building. His apartment was on the 4th floor, no elevator. When he opened the door and saw Oliva, recognition flashed in his eyes. You're Sebastian's wife, he said instead of a greeting. I was expecting you sooner. Victor was a gray-haired man of about 60, with intelligent eyes behind glasses and the measured movements of a professor. He led them into a spacious living room filled with bookshelves. Sebastian said you would come, he continued as they sat down. He left something for you. He walked over to an old secretary desk and retrieved a sealed envelope from a hidden drawer. I don't know what's inside, he admitted. Sebastian only told me it was important and that I should give it to you, and only to you. Oliva took the envelope with trembling hands, another message from the past, another secret. She slowly opened it and unfolded the paper inside. It was indeed a will, handwritten and dated 1 month earlier. I, Terrazas Sebastian Alejandro, being of sound mind and memory, hereby declare my final wishes regarding the distribution of my assets in the event of my death. Most of it matched what she already knew. She received the apartment and the official business, Antonio got a share in Mercurio, Elena was granted a percentage from the sale of the country house. But then came a part she hadn't expected. I specifically state that in the event a child is born to Elena Andrea, 25% of my personal savings in foreign bank accounts shall be allocated to this child, to be accessed upon reaching the age of 21. Oliva, if you're reading this, know that I regret the pain I caused you. I am not worthy of your forgiveness, but I ask you to find the strength to forgive Elena. Her only fault was yielding to my manipulation. You are the two most important women in my life, and more than anything, I would like you to support each other after I'm gone. Oliva slowly lowered the paper. A heavy silence fell over the room. What does it say? Elena asked softly. Oliva silently handed her the will. Elena read it, then closed her eyes and sank heavily onto the couch. You knew, didn't you? Oliva asked. About his double life, his shady dealings, the dangerous people he was involved with. Elena nodded. And you stayed with him anyway, knowing how much it would hurt me. I told you the truth, Oliva. Elena looked at her sister, almost pleading. I didn't plan it. But when it happened, I couldn't stop. It felt like my only chance to have something real. Sleeping with your sister's husband? Oliva gave a bitter laugh. To feel special, Elena whispered. I was always in the background. And with him? With him, I mattered. At least for those few hours we spent together. At that moment, Oliva understood clearly there were two victims in the room. Yes, Elena had betrayed her, crossed the most sacred boundaries. But wasn't Elena also used and deceived? What now? Elena asked, her voice uncertain. You'll take the safe deposit key, the documents. And then what? I don't know, Oliva admitted honestly. I want to get to the bottom of this. Find out who Leva is and whether he's really dangerous. Open that safe deposit box. Then I'll decide. Victor, who had silently watched them, finally spoke. You're welcome to stay here tonight, if you'd like. At my age, we go to bed early, so the place is yours. Tomorrow, with fresh minds, you can decide what to do. Thank you, Oliva said sincerely. That's very kind. After Victor left them to settle in, Elena gently touched Oliva's hand. I understand you'll never forgive me, she said. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. Oliva was silent for a long time, staring at her sister, then slowly nodded. Time will tell. I can't promise you anything now, but you're the mother of my niece or nephew, and no matter how angry I am, that child is part of our family. Elena swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. Oliva walked to the window and looked out into the dark street. Her soul felt just as dark, but somewhere, faint and distant, she felt a flicker of light, a hope that one day, she might be able to forgive. Not for Elena. Not for Sebastian. But for herself, so she could find the strength to live on. Tomorrow we go to the bank, she said firmly, and find out what else Sebastian was hiding from us. The gray morning slowly crept through the windows of Victor Salas's apartment. Oliva sat in an armchair wrapped in a blanket, watching the first rays of sun break through the clouds. She had hardly slept, replaying every revelation, every new wound. On the couch, curled up, slept Elena. In sleep, she looked so young and defenseless, just like when they used to share a room as children. Oliva gazed at her sister, trying to make sense of her emotions. The anger and pain hadn't vanished, but something else was there too. Compassion? Understanding? She couldn't name it. Antonio and Maria had taken the guest room. They had all agreed to stay together until the situation was resolved. The door creaked softly and Victor entered with a tray. Can't sleep? He asked, placing it on the table. I brought coffee. Thank you, Oliva accepted the cup gratefully. You've been so kind to us, even though we're practically strangers. Victor sat down in the chair across from her. I knew Sebastian for nearly 30 years, he said quietly, so as not to wake Elena. Since college. He was always a complicated man. Did you know about his double life? Oliva asked. Victor shook his head. Not the details, but I suspected he was hiding something. Sebastian was never quite who he appeared to be, he paused, staring out the window. You know, in his youth, he was different. Ambitious, yes, but not so calculating. Life doesn't always change people for the better. And it didn't change me, Oliva said bitterly. 15 years I lived in a shell I built for myself. The perfect wife, the perfect home, the perfect life, and it was all an illusion. But now you're free of it, Victor said gently. Sometimes we have to lose everything to start truly living. Oliva looked at him, surprised. You speak like someone who's been through it. I have, Victor nodded. My wife left me 20 years ago, for my best friend, by the way. I thought I wouldn't survive the betrayal. But in the end, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. How can that be the best thing? Oliva asked skeptically. Because it woke me up, he smiled. It forced me to stop playing a role I'd written for myself and start living for real. I became a writer, traveled the world, met amazing people. None of that would have happened if my life had stayed on its old track. Oliva stared thoughtfully into her cup. Could her life really change for the better after such devastation? It seemed impossible. We need to get ready, she said, noticing it was 9 a.m. The bank opens in an hour. Banco de la Nación stood in a majestic building in the business district. High ceilings, marble columns, an aura of solidity and reliability. At the entrance, a guard carefully checked their documents before letting them in. How can I help you? A polite young woman at the counter asked. We need to open a safe deposit box, Oliva replied, showing the key. They were led into a special room where the deposit boxes were located. The bank employee inserted his key into the first lock, then Oliva inserted hers into the second. There was a click, and the metal drawer slid out. I'll leave you, the bank employee said. When you're done, press the call button. Once they were alone, Oliva carefully opened the box. Inside were a folder of documents, a sealed envelope, and a small velvet box. What's that? Elena asked curiously, looking at the contents. Oliva picked up the folder first. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and photographs. She skimmed through them but didn't notice anything unusual. Looks like ordinary business papers, she said. Antonio, peeking over her shoulder, shook his head. Not exactly. This is evidence of money laundering, dates, amounts, names. This could go to the police. And put us at risk from the people involved in this, Maria remarked skeptically. Not necessarily, Antonio countered. We can pass the information on anonymously or use it as leverage. Oliva set the folder aside and picked up the envelope. Inside was a short letter from Sebastian. Oliva, if you've opened this box, the situation must be serious. The folder contains documents that can protect you and our child if Elena has told you about him. These are proofs against the people I worked with. Use them wisely. In the box is something special. I bought it a long time ago but never found the courage to give it to you. Now it's yours. Forgive me for everything. S. Oliva looked at the velvet box with confusion. She carefully opened it and froze. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small diamond. What is it? Elena asked, looking over her sister's shoulder. Instead of answering, Oliva handed her the letter. Elena quickly scanned it. He bought this for you, she asked, surprised. But why keep it in a bank box? It wasn't for me, Oliva answered softly, examining the ring. Look at the engraving inside. Engraved on the inner band were the words, "In forever." Natalia, Elena breathed. He bought this ring for her and never gave it to her, Oliva concluded. I wonder why. Maybe he was afraid it would make things too official, Antonio suggested, or that you would find out. Oliva turned the ring in her fingers, feeling a strange mix of emotions, not jealousy, it was too late for that. More like a final confirmation that her marriage had been built on shaky ground. What should we do with the documents? Maria asked, nodding toward the folder. I know someone we can go to, Elena suddenly said. Sebastian had a contact in the financial police. He kept him as a last resort if things went wrong. I can reach out to him, pass on the information anonymously. Oliva looked at her sister in surprise. Are you sure you can trust him? As far as I know, yes, Elena nodded. He's honest and has a personal score to settle with Leva, or rather with young Crespo, according to the documents. All right, Oliva agreed. Contact him. She carefully placed everything back into the folder, except the ring. She wasn't sure why, but it felt important to keep it, not as a reminder of Sebastian's betrayal, but as a symbol of his dual nature. A man who may have loved two women but couldn't be honest with either. The days following the bank visit were filled with tense anticipation. Elena contacted the financial police officer and passed on copies of the documents. They decided to lie low for a while. Oliva and Maria stayed at Victor's apartment, while Elena and Antonio moved to a hotel outside the city. On the fourth day after their visit, the news reported the arrest of several people on suspicion of financial fraud, among them Ignacio Oliva and his brother Jorge Crespo. "Looks like it worked," Maria said, switching off the TV. "Do you think the danger's past now?" "We need to wait a bit longer," Oliva replied. "Make sure all the trails lead to them, not us." Elena and Antonio returned a week later, once it was clear the case against the Crespo brothers was serious and they had no interest in going after witnesses. "What will you do now?" Elena asked when she and Oliva were alone in Victor's living room. "Will you go back to the apartment you shared with Sebastian?" Oliva shook her head. "No. I've decided to sell it, and the country house too. Too many memories." "Where will you live?" "For now, with Maria. Then I'll find something small, something cozy." She looked at her sister. "And you?" Elena instinctively laid her hand on her now visibly rounded belly. "I'll stay in my apartment." "Get ready for the baby." She paused. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said in the office, about how I ruined your life. You were right. What I did was terrible. But do you really regret it?" Oliva asked, looking her in the eyes. "Now, yes," Elena answered sincerely. "Back then, I didn't think about consequences. I thought you'd never find out, that no one would be hurt. I was selfish. And now? Now I'm afraid I've lost my sister forever." They sat in silence for a long time, staring at each other across the chasm of betrayal. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you," Oliva said at last. "But I don't want to live with this weight. I don't want your child to grow up knowing his mother and aunt don't speak." Elena suddenly hugged her sister, and after a moment's hesitation, Oliva hugged her back, not with the same old, unconditional love. Too much had been broken, but with hope for a new beginning. "What do you think it'll be?" Oliva asked, pulling back. "A boy or a girl?" "The doctor says a girl," Elena smiled. "I want to name her Natalia." "After her?" Oliva asked, surprised. "Yes," Elena nodded. "I know it's strange, but she was an important part of Sebastian's life. It feels right to keep her memory." Oliva nodded thoughtfully. There was something symbolic in the choice, like a circle closing, the threads of fate weaving into a single tapestry. 6 months later, Oliva stood at the window of her new office, small but bright and cozy, with a view of Tres de Febrero Park. On her desk was a photograph, she, Elena holding little Natalia, and Antonio. Their strange, imperfect, but real family. After Sebastian's death, Oliva had struggled to find herself. She sold most of their shared assets, dividing the money between herself, Antonio, and a trust fund for Natalia. But she had no idea what to do next. The answer came unexpectedly. Victor, with whom they had stayed in touch, suggested she try publishing. He had connections, experience, and a genuine desire to help. Oliva turned out to have an unexpected talent for discovering interesting writers and working with texts. Now she had her own small publishing house, focused on women's fiction. She called it New Chapter, a name that reflected not just the company's niche, but her life as well. There was a knock at the door, and Antonio entered. "Ready?" he asked with a smile. "Elena's already waiting at the restaurant. Maria said she'd come too." "Yes, I'm coming." Oliva grabbed her bag. "I can't believe Natalia's already 3 months old. Time flies. And so much can change in 6 months," Antonio said, helping her with her coat. They stepped outside. The day was sunny despite it being autumn, and the park leaves blazed with gold and crimson. "How's your project going?" Oliva asked as they walked to the car. "Great," Antonio said enthusiastically. "Investors are interested, and there's potential to expand. Who would have thought my finance degree would finally come in handy for something meaningful? Your father would be proud of you." "I hope so," Antonio replied seriously. "Though I still struggle to understand who he really was." "I'm not sure anyone truly knew him," Oliva said thoughtfully. "Maybe not even himself." They got into the car and drove to the restaurant, where Elena, little Natalia, and Maria were waiting. The new, strange, but true family. Along the way, Oliva thought about how much her life had changed, how long she had lived in a shell of comfortable illusions, how painful it had been to break out of it. How the betrayal of those she loved had nearly destroyed her, but ultimately made her stronger. In her purse, tucked away in a small compartment, was the gold ring engraved within, "Forever," not as a reminder of lies and pain, but as a testament that life is more complex than it seems, that love takes many forms, and that sometimes one must lose everything to find oneself. At the restaurant, Elena greeted them, thinner since the birth, dark circles under her eyes, but radiant. In her arms she held a tiny bundle, little Natalia, peacefully sleeping. "Want to hold her?" Elena asked, offering the baby to Oliva. Oliva gently took her niece. The baby was warm and incredibly light. She opened her eyes, dark, like Sebastian's, and looked attentively at her aunt. "Hello, little one," Oliva whispered. "Welcome to our strange family." Natalia blinked and drifted back to sleep, nestling trustingly against Oliva. In that moment, Oliva felt the last fragments of pain and resentment dissolve, replaced by something new, not pure joy. There was still a long way to go, but a solid sense that life was moving forward. That even after the deepest betrayal, one can find the strength to start over. She was no longer the same Oliva who had lived 15 years in the golden cage of an ideal marriage. The new Oliva understood the value of honesty, could face the truth, and wasn't afraid to walk her own path. She handed the baby to Maria, who received her with delight, then looked around the table at the people gathered there. Her new family. Her new life. "To us," she said, raising her glass of wine. "To surviving, and to what lies ahead." Outside the restaurant window, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in golden tones. The day was ending, but many more lay ahead. And in each of them, the chance to choose who to be, how to live, whom to love. The chance to write a new chapter of her own story. Her story. Not someone else's.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.